A lot of people fall victim into what is the zone of competency? What are things that I'm really good at? So I was really good at certain things, and I was getting good at pitching our services at the time because I was so passionate about it. I was the one doing the work. So I wasn't selling other people, I was selling myself. I realized that my zone of genius is not actually selling the thing. It's figuring out the magic of all the pieces of the puzzle and the ideas and the connection. I sought out someone who was way better in the thing than I was, in my partner. He was able to help us establish our value, our worth, and acquire the right kind of clients.
Welcome to Entrepreneur's Handbook, where we give you inspiring startup stories with practical takeaways for you, the listener. Today's guest is Pete Sena, a brand experience expert. He founded Digital Surgeons back in 2004 with only $5,000 and is now an 8-figure organization with over 50 employees. He's helped craft the story of people from Lady Gaga to United Technologies to the US Open. He continues to work with all different types of companies from startups to Fortune 500 and has helped many companies in their fundraising efforts, helping them to collectively raise over 100 million. It's been a pleasure to have him on. I hope you enjoy listening. Welcome, Pete, to Entrepreneur's Handbook. Thanks for being here.
Hey, it's awesome to be here, man.
So let's get straight into it. How did you get into entrepreneurship in the first place?
Great question. Wow, it's been a long time. I can't remember a time before I was an entrepreneur. So I think that, like most entrepreneurs, I got into entrepreneurship because there was a specific problem that I wanted to solve. And ultimately, I didn't know of a way to solve that problem in the current confines of traditional employment, which obviously now it's 2021. The idea of what is traditional employment is certainly changing. But back then, I had a background in design and development. And with that background, people wanted folks to specialize. They want, and all the jobs I had at the time wanted me to either be the designer or either be the developer. And I have this sort of mindset where I don't do well with or. I like to sort of think about and I like to sort of blend and connect things together. It's a big part of who I am in work and life and all those things. So I think when I started my first company, which was really a marketing consultancy, just to sort of simplify it, it came down to there was a thing that I wanted to do that I really believed in. I saw a world that was going digital and getting increasingly digital, and I didn't think was being well served in the market. And all the jobs that I had been looking at and searching for didn't connect with that. So like most people, I went and started my own thing.
Yeah, I like what you said there about not having the or. So you have the and between development and design and mixing the two together. So my background is quite similar in a way. So I was a tech consultant that did full stack. So I did front end, back end, and everything in between. And from that, do you believe that being a generalist has made you a better entrepreneur? Or do you think that if you were highly specialized, that would lead to more success?
It's a fantastic question. I mean, I think, for me, one of my really great piece of advice I got a long time ago was first you have to define success because it's not a standard equation for everyone. And then you have to define happiness and ultimately trying to strike a balance between happiness and success together. That's where sort of the magic happens from what I've heard. So to answer your question, I think me personally, I would argue you have to find the things that light you up and give you energy and flock towards those things. So for me, I love to learn. I love to then apply those learnings and I love to connect the dots. It's just a really big passion of mine. When I think about some of the entrepreneurs that I admire or I look up to, folks that I know in real life or folks that I've just followed like the Elon Musks and the Steve Jobs of the world, right, back in the day. I think their ability to connect dots and cross-train and have knowledge and expertise in different areas has really enabled them to change the world and to solve problems in a different way. It's really depends on the type of person you are. So I have colleagues and friends and family that really specialize and they are the best at that one thing. And then I have people who are the proverbial jack of all trades or Jill of all trades. And for me, I've always fancied myself as a creative generalist, and it's really benefited me because what I'm able to do, especially as a consultant who works with startups and Fortune 50 companies, is I'm able to apply all those learnings to different businesses. So I might have worked on like a small day spa 10 years ago. I can apply the same customer experience models to a Fortune 50 brand or client that I'm working with today, right? So that to me is that's my super skill is those connections and how they come together. But I don't think one is or isn't better than the next. But that's just my own experience. I think to answer your question, there's a lot of different phrases and keywords and topics that come up in the work that I do. I think had I specialized in any one of those things, I probably could have been a lot more proficient at those individual things. But I draw on the strength of the collective wisdom. And that's just me personally.
When you first started your business, was that an easy decision for you to make? Or do you remember being like very stressed out about that and struggling to make the leap?
I was young and inexperienced at the time. I think I started my first business when I was like 18 or 19. So I didn't have a lot of fear. I mean, if I started a business today, being a father, being a husband, having, a mortgage and those things, I think my mindset would definitely be very different. But back then I didn't have anything to lose. I could always go back to, sleeping in my parents' basement if I had to. Luckily I had that thing to fall back on. Not everyone has that to fall back on. So I think back then I was grateful that I had a lot of privilege that I was able to lean into and go out and experiment. And, obviously learned more from the failures than I did from the successes, as I tell everyone. But yeah, it wasn't hard for me to do that at that point, because for me, I was sort of looking at this world and the different jobs that were available in it. And I felt like I was hard pressed to go in the direction of a place that didn't yet exist. Certainly if I had come to know the present day version of myself, I probably would have went and worked for that person and probably gotten a lot more experience. One recommendation I would definitely make for people is, if possible, learn from others before you plunge right into your own thing, because I think there's a lot of mistakes I could have probably not made that, while part of them defined me, I would say in some cases they probably constrained hitting, what Jeffrey Moore calls escape velocity, if you in the audience is familiar with it, that sort of breakthrough inflection moment. But yeah, no, I think probably could have gotten there faster and with less friction if I had a bit more experience. So that's just one thing that shows up for me.
Yeah, I love that confession that you didn't have as much risk, because sometimes people I think overplay that, where they say, I took this massive risk and I risked everything. And for some people, you've always got the backup. There's always something else you can do. And entrepreneurship doesn't need to be so scary sometimes. So I remember the quote, I think it was Bill Gates who said that starting Microsoft wasn't a big risk because he could always just go back to Harvard again. And yes, he put himself out there. Yes, he took a different path. But he also knew that if it didn't work out, there was other things he could do. And like you said, if entrepreneurship didn't work out for you, you could stay with your parents. You could go down other paths. You could still experiment. And for anybody listening, if you're thinking about starting your own business, don't think that ruins everything, right? If it doesn't work out, that's fine. You can then try to go into something else. You can go back to the world of work. You can create another business. And I think that's a really important point that you made there, because it's quite often that people let that fear overwhelm them. Whereas you can always think about, if this doesn't work out, what's your plan B? And having that plan B can just make you feel a bit less anxious. And what you mentioned there about escape velocity. So right at the very start, you're only 18 or 19. How did you get those first clients, and how did you build it up to the stage that you're at now?
Great question. So I think first and foremost, the one thing that the audience should know about me is that I am a fierce introvert. So though I play an extrovert well on TV, when I was 18 or 19, the idea of being on a podcast here with you, on video, on audio, that would have been terrifying for me. So the one thing I want to put out there to everyone is getting clients often involves a word that makes some people want to crawl up into a ball. I was one of those people, which is sales. And sales was not something that I respected, I liked, or I enjoyed, and I certainly wasn't good at. One of my first jobs that I worked at, I managed to convince them that we could keep working together and I could do more for them if I was a contractor and owned my own business. So one of my first clients at the time was my former employer, very, very large, probably one of the largest sports companies in the world. And when I left and I started working with them as my first client, doing the work created some great things in the portfolio. Again, I'm in the business of marketing and design branding. So we were doing a lot of digital marketing experiences, UI, UX, just launching different things for at the time, things that you would normally watch on TV that you would now go to the internet to experience or connect with, right? Now we sort of look at internet first, but back then it was sort of internet second, right? So and again, I'm talking just to give a time scale for folks, talking about 2004, 2005, just to give you a time scale. So it's a very different world back then. But in that, one client led to another. And I'm a firm believer that let the work speak for itself, let the results of your work speak for itself. And great work begets great work. And from there, we got some introductions, and then probably about a year and a half, 2 years into doing that, it got too much. I was overwhelmed. I was like, oh my God, I have all these inquiries and I don't know how to field them. I don't know how to sell. I don't know how to, drive what my value is and that sort of thing. And that was where I sort of serendipitously met my partner, my co-founder, who has a background in strategy and business development and in all aspects of sales and marketing. And it was sort of like yin meeting yang. And when that happened, ultimately he was able to step in. And this is a piece of advice I would offer to all entrepreneurs, find what some people like to refer to as that zone of genius, right? So a lot of people fall victim into what is the zone of competency? What are the things that I'm really good at? So I was really good at certain things, and I was getting good at pitching our services at the time because I was so passionate about it. I was the one doing the work. So I wasn't selling other people. I was selling myself, which is easier to do. And then I realized that my zone of genius is not actually selling the thing. It's figuring out the magic of all the pieces of the puzzle and the ideas and the connection. So I went out and rather than sort of being in a place of doing things I didn't want to do, I sought out someone who was way better in the thing than I was, in my partner. And he was able to help us establish our value, our worth, and acquire the right kind of clients. The kind of clients that would let me, and at the time, just me and him, but then from there, our bigger team, do this really amazing work. And then to your first question, how did we get clients? Well, every time we would put something out that would go well, and every time we would put in the extra midnight oil or go the extra mile so that the client was happy, they talked about that. And we just basically said, hey, if you're happy with what we did, if you could just let a couple people know about it, and then one thing leads to a referral, and then before you know it, you're working with some of the greatest companies and clients in the world doing amazing things. And it sounds easy, right, for those listening to this that are starting their own thing. But what I would say is really focus on the work, focus on the customer, whoever your customer is. And at the end of the day, that's what's going to lead to the next customer, the next customer. And also remember, like, one piece of advice I would give myself back then was I did a lot of work that I didn't want to. And that was a mistake I made early on. And, if you launch a blue widget, then you get paid to do blue widgets. So, for those that are starting their business now, be really mindful of what you put out there in your world, what you put out there in your portfolio or on your website or wherever you publish your information, LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok, Medium, which we love Medium, right? I think that's sort of what I would say there. So I hope that connects the dots for you.
Yeah, and I like what you said there as well, because I think it's quite often now for people and new entrepreneurs to focus so heavily on their marketing and selling themselves rather than focusing on the work they already have. And as you said, if you can't fulfill the orders you have, it doesn't matter if you get more work, because that reputation is going to start getting damaged sooner or later. And it's sometimes better not to put all the marketing out there, not to push really hard for clients. And maybe it means your first few months are a bit leaner, but it means that you then make those clients very happy. Because for a lot of businesses as well, they don't really need the mass market, especially if you're looking at consulting or other businesses like that. It's better to have a few clients and those clients pay like handsomely than to try and get 1,000 people who are paying you $1. And it's the whole thing about how do you get $1 million of revenue. You can have like 1 million customers who pay you $1 each, or you can have 10 customers who pay you 100,000. You've got to work out what works your business, but also what suits like you and your co-founders.
100%. And I love that point. One thing I would say to that is I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's really important to have self-awareness as an entrepreneur, or in any situation. Self-awareness is just such a critical skill. I think EQ, or emotional quotient, is something that is dramatically undervalued in a lot of businesses. I think we're finally catching on now to see that EQ matters more than anything. The soft skills are indeed the hard skills, as I like to say to a lot of my folks. But there's really at the core level, there's only two ways to build any business, no matter what business it is. You can sell more things to your existing customers, or you can go out and you can get more customers, right? That's the only two ways to build any type of business, right? I mean, again, I'm oversimplifying on purpose for this audience here, but I think the reality is it depends on the business you want to be in. If you want to be in a premium consulting or premium type business where you have a very low volume of customers at a very high premium price, that's a great business. If you want to be a high volume of customers at a low price, that's also a business. And I think it ultimately depends on what's the business you want to be in, what's your model, what's your value proposition, and knowing that and owning that. Because I think the challenge is both come with extreme challenges, right? So if you have a very low volume of customers that are paying you a lot of money, losing one of those customers could be detrimental to your business. It could result in you having to lay off your people or perhaps not being able to pay your own fees and whatnot. So that's dangerous in some cases, especially if you don't have a pipeline of new business that you can just pick up if you lose a big customer, right? And I would say the inverse of that is also true for the high volume of customers, right? So if you have a high volume of customers, losing a couple customers here and there is not a big deal, but that could then affect your reputation later, potentially. Again, we see how that affects restaurants with bad Yelp reviews in some cases, right? Just as a primer. But more importantly, it's changing how you think about the volume of customer service and how that changes over time. It's a very different model to be in the couple of clients that you're servicing versus, thousands of clients or millions of clients that you're servicing. So yeah, no, it's an interesting thought experiment. I think one thing that I did not do enough of, and I think entrepreneurs don't do enough of early on, is sort of think about the bigger, broader future. When I was 19 years old, I was so focused on getting the next client or doing the next thing or paying my bills or paying my staff. Admittedly, I would say I made the cardinal sin of any founder or CEO, right? Which is I was only thinking about tomorrow and I wasn't thinking about the bigger, broader future. And I think what that leads to is you make mistakes. People don't understand the vision as much as they should because you yourself don't understand the vision as much as you should. And I think that that's something that first-time founders and entrepreneurs, myself, I made that mistake. I made that mistake a number of times. And I think that it's hard, as they say, there's all these different phrases, you can't be eyes in the sky and boots on the ground at the same time. You have to sort of pivot between. And, some kind of classic entrepreneur textbooks or Twitter feeds that you subscribe to will say, CEO has two jobs. One, don't run out of money. And two, set a culture to grow the organization, and some version of that. Like we've all seen the same trite advice, right? And those things are absolutely true. But the challenge is when you're trying to balance all of that as a first-time founder and you're dealing with the market and your own personal growth, it's difficult. So why do I share that? I share that to say, I think that something I'm seeing a lot that people can really benefit from is the idea of intrapreneurship. I think that people can take the tenets of entrepreneurship, the creativity, the problem solving, the customer obsession, and bring that to organizations of all shapes and sizes, small businesses all the way up to the bigger, larger enterprises. And you can deploy that same kind of entrepreneurship in a company. So for those that might be afraid, like you mentioned early on, you're like, hey, why weren't you afraid? Well, let's assume today in my late 30s, almost 40, I go and start a new company. And let's assume that I wasn't in the financial position that I'm in today, bless my journey. I would probably de-risk it the best I could because I tend to be pretty risk averse. Some entrepreneurs are, have a very high tolerance for risk. So a question for the audience to ask themselves is, what's your tolerance for risk? How much are you willing to put on the line? If you have no plan B and you have no plan C and you're all in on this thing, maybe it's a problem that you're trying to change or a product you're trying to launch or a service you're trying to deliver that you really feel like you're going to change the world on. Well, to that end, you have to be willing to make that risk. But if you are more risk averse, again, there's all these stories of Sam Walton from Walmart, not that we want to be that person, didn't start Walmart until they were in their 40s. There's a lot of entrepreneurs, I believe, that we hear these stories of starting businesses later. But for every one of those stories that kind of don't make it to the headlines, you hear all the stories of the 17 and 18 and 19-year-old young women and young men and young folks that ultimately launch $1 billion unicorn. But the numbers are against you. Like, if you think you're going to become the next Instagram, Facebook, etc., that's a long shot. And I think that now, today, more than ever, we're met with a lot of mental health challenges as a society, brought about by many more things than I'm capable or competent in telling you about. But I think that we just have to have that self-awareness. And that self-awareness is something I will keep beating that drum until it breaks.
Yeah. And I like you mentioned as well about being the boots on the ground and the guy in the sky. How did you make that transition? Because you said at the beginning you were an introvert who liked doing everything.
I'm still an introvert.
Yeah.
I'm going to need to do a lot of rest after this meeting. Yeah.
But from going that position where you're an introvert and I guess you were running almost a single person company, then you had your co-founder, to going from that and kind of giving up some of that control of the detail to trusting your staff and building up the team. How did you find that transition? Did you make it at the right time, or did you hold on a bit longer than you might have done because you didn't want to become the person who's the leader in a way? Did you find that transition hard?
Candidly, I think I still find that transition hard. I think if you were to talk to some people on my team, they might say that today I'm still too close to things. And I think those folks might not be wrong. They're probably right. To answer the question, so there's a thing I always like to refer to in user experience design, which is what I like to call the gradation of change. And it's something I talk about a lot. And it's this idea that, and I'll just pick two high contrast colors because they're easy. These colors have you can pick red and yellow if you want, but black and white, right? So you've got sort of white on the left side, just imagine, and then all the way on the right, pure black. And there's a gradation of color to go from white to the light gray to a darker gray to a full black. It's a gradation. So I think what I tend to do now that I think is a lot more sustainable for both a business's growth, a change management perspective, and also just your own sanity is plot what black looks like, plot what that future state looks like, plot what the current state looks like, and then think about that gradation of change. So to answer your question, as a founder or a CEO or someone starting something, or even just building a team working for another company as a regular full-time employee, you have to sort of balance the future and the now. And I think the challenge with that is, balancing that gradation of change, I think is really difficult because you have to constantly be sort of leaping into the future and zoning out or zooming out and then leaping into the specific. And just to get a little bit more kind of tangible, tactical here, it's like as a leader, you're always dealing in abstracts and concrete decisions, right? So abstract decisions might be, pick an industry, it just doesn't matter. Automotive, perfect. Love good cars, right? So let's use one of my favorite cars. I'm a big Elon Musk fan. I drive a Tesla. I love Tesla. I say that as a shareholder. So please don't short the stock. But no, jokes aside, automotive. So, okay, if you were starting a new disruptive technology in the automotive space that you wanted to one day potentially exit to a Tesla-like object, in starting that, you have to worry about today, where am I going to get the funding to do this? Who am I going to hire that's going to help me get this thing done? What are all the different parts and ingredients to make this recipe successful? But also, in order to get that funding, in order to get those people, they need a vision. They need a roadmap. They need for you to paint a picture, which means you have to sort of step outside of that concrete day-to-day into the more abstract future state. People are looking for that direction. They're looking for that inspiration, that vision, that roadmap. So I think that gradation of change I mentioned earlier is you're constantly navigating the now or the concrete and the abstract, which is the future. And I think that sort of balancing that, asking yourself the question, am I approaching a problem right now from a concrete stance or from an abstract stance? I use that a lot when I'm talking to my staff. It's if I'm meeting with someone on a key objective or initiative, I'm always trying to, in my own mind, calibrate, am I being too high level? Or am I being too, am I micromanaging? And balancing that early on, I made a shitload of mistakes. And look, I make mistakes every day, still to this day. I've sought out leadership training. I've sought out executive coaching. I've read, the bookcase worth of books on self-development and self-awareness. But if there's one thing I would say is just to sort of sum it all up, it's you have to know the difference between the present and the future. And just know as a leader, a founder of any size or shape, you have to balance those two. And I think the best way to develop skills there is just by doing it. You have to practice. It's not, I wish you could sort of plug into the Matrix and, the Matrix is launching this month. I wish you could just plug into the Matrix and have that, be there. But the truth of the matter is it's always a work in progress. Everything's a work in progress. I've been doing this now for, 16, 17 years. And I still mess it up royally sometimes and have to kind of step in and go back to my principles, go back to my grounding and ask myself that question of where am I at right now? So I hope that's helpful. I mean, again, even though they might look infallible, we're all humans at the end of the day, no matter how experienced we are.
Yeah. And I think that's something really important for founders to realize as well, is that they're going to make mistakes, and that's normal. And like you said, even after 16 years, you're still making mistakes because that's the nature, right? And I think one of the other big things as well for people who are dealing with staff is that each person has their own individual needs. So you might think you've got it worked out, but then somebody will view something in another way that you didn't expect. And you can't avoid that. It's about how do you deal with that? So how do you deal with that in a healthy way and keep the person on board or keep everyone happy and listen to the ideas?
Yeah, that's a tough question. Honestly, I don't even know how qualified I am to answer that, to be candid. I think what shows up for me as a leader is people are like snowflakes. They're all unique in the way they approach things. But ultimately, I think if you share a set of values, so that's why I think company values are more than just a poster on the wall. If you share a sense of shared beliefs and shared values, it's easier for you to reference those as a shared set of feelings and thinking that I think you can all sort of adhere to. And I think clarity is one of the hardest things in businesses, because in our brains, the picture I see in my brain is definitely not identical to the picture in your brain, even if we're identical people, which we're clearly not, right? So I think that as a leader, you're having to balance logic and emotion on a daily basis just because of the human condition. That's ultimately where I see a lot of challenges for leaders, especially, I advise and coach. I have a whole kind of advisory practice that I do a lot of work on, spends a lot of my time on, and I'm coaching tech founders a lot of times. And tech founders obviously come from more of an engineering background, similar to yourself, full stack, back end, et cetera. And they lean in with logic, but but as humans, we're very emotional people, right? All humans are. So I think that it's teaching these tech founders and not teaching them, but supporting them and nurturing them to help them realize that you can't clone a person the way you can clone a Git repository. You can't check in or check out a piece of code and deploy a piece of code to a person's behavior, which I think at the basis, like the one thing that I've learned the most is you need trust. Trust is the most important thing in any relationship. If you've got trust, you can sort of get through the hard stuff. But without that trust, if there's not a foundation of trust and mutual respect, it all goes out the window no matter what playbook you follow. So yeah, I don't know. I hope that answers the question. I think what shows up for me is leadership is such a subjective, abstract thing. I've seen all different types of leaders be effective with all different types of people, and all different types of leaders be ineffective. I think at the end of the day, it's learning to listen, learning to ask good questions, learning to get aligned on principles and values, and then making sure that, like, what does done look like? What is the ultimate outcome we're both chasing towards? And then how can each of us have a contribution in the matter? That's, I think, the most important thing, because at the end of the day, people need trust and they want to feel heard and accepted. And if you can do that, that's where I've had the most success. I think whenever I've tried to sort of push one of my ideas forward without buy-in or consensus, that's where I've failed epically as a leader or a CEO.
What are the values of your business? Is it something which you onboard people when you tell them these are our values, or is it more informal?
It's absolutely formal. So like one of the things we do, it's really funny actually. I can share with you really quick. One of the first things that we do in the interview process when they're screening is we ask people what they thought of our values. And a lot of our interviews we do on video, and it's so funny when someone actually doesn't read the values, because you could just tell. And that's a really good way to pass what I call the bullshit test, which is like, are you going to bullshit? Because like the answer that we all want as founders is tell us the truth, right? Tell us, be like, you know what? I didn't read your values page. I didn't even know it existed. Okay, awesome. That's an opportunity to start a conversation. So I think for us, we're very, very values driven. So as a business in the space of designing demand and experiences for customers, so we work with a lot of brands and startups and enterprises. We're in the business of basically a brand experience consultancy. We really focus on that. One of our first core values is around curiosity. So it's about be curious. So we believe that creativity and curiosity in the world are broken. So we're there to help organizations fix it. So that being said, if we don't hire people who are highly curious and creative, how can we possibly bring that forward to our customers? So that's our first thing we train for. That's one of our first core values. Another core value is what we call care greatly. So care greatly is a really important value. We have an internal metric of success that we use. So I'm really big into KPIs or key performance indicators. We recently we had lots of KPIs over the years, been around for over 16 years. And one of the most successful KPI frameworks we ever rolled out was one that we came up with internally called the 4 green lights. And the 4 green lights drive everything we do. So that core value of care greatly. So there's 4 green lights. The first is team satisfaction. Is the team happy, whole in the process, right? Happy, whole, healthy. Are they able to put their family first? That's really, really critical. We walk that walk. We've fired clients. I just fired a client this week as a result of it because it was affecting team sat. So our rule is if you can't get 4 green lights, we don't work with that client. Doesn't matter. First is team satisfaction. Second is client satisfaction. Can we ultimately deliver and make that client happy, right? Third is the impact of the work. Will working with us help that client achieve their result or move the needle for the client? And then fourth is profitability. And the reason I put profitability last is because profit is not a goal, it is a result. If profit is your goal, I worry about you as a company and your core values. Again, great companies are profitable, but they don't focus on profitability. They focus on success with their teams and with their customers. So that care greatly thing means caring greatly about yourself, your team, and your clients. So care greatly is a very important core value. Our third core value is all about being responsive to change. So we have literally obviously we're a remote first company now because of the pandemic, but we still have a beautiful, amazing office space. We actually own a tech campus in New Haven, Connecticut, where our headquarters is based out of. And in one of the large spaces, sandblasted into the brick on the wall is a big quote, which is a big part of our culture, which is change is the only constant. You'll see that on the walls. You'll see that in certain publications that we print on. And the third core value around that is adapt and respond. The market is moving faster than it ever has. The world is changing at a rapid pace. I think one of the reasons that we stood up to COVID and were able to get through it and really thriving, having one of our best years ever, really comes down to the fact that we adapted and responded to the market, to the world. So that third core value is, are you responsive to change, right? It's super, super important. And the last core value, sort of taking a page out of the Matrix, which I'm so excited that they're launching the new one this month. Hopefully it doesn't suck. The core value we use on the website is actually a picture of a bent spoon, which is a kind of a throwback to the Matrix. And the fourth core value is simply believe. And simply believe is that what I've seen energetically, I'm a big meditator. You can see sort of some of the stuff in the background here, is we can manifest things as people if we believe in it. So if the Henry Ford quote that I always reference in a lot of my talks is, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. So what I like to say is if we believe in each other, if we believe in our client, if we believe in what we're doing, we can win. Now, that might sound a little bit lofty for those of you that don't know who I am. You're listening to this now or later in the future. The true reality is when we follow these core values, when we can get to 4 green lights, we're doing some amazing breakthrough work for great clients. And what I'll tell you is I've been doing this for 16 years. I have fucked up a ton. I've made a million mistakes. And I think most of my mistakes came down to not listening enough, not trusting my instincts, and ultimately doing something that didn't have all 4 green lights. And again, it took me way too long to get to those 4 green lights. I think if we established that our first few years in business, I think our growth would have been a lot more of a hockey stick than it ultimately was. So if you're listening to this now, whether you're just starting your business tomorrow or you've been in your business like me for over 16 years, I'd say one thing's true. Know your values, know your principles, know what you stand for, know what you don't stand for, and lean into that and lead that way. And that's, I think, will ultimately lead to your success.
Yeah, as you mentioned, I think you talked about this before we started recording, is that you've worked with some incredible clients and made those breakthroughs for them based on those 4 green lights. Is there any examples or case studies you can give us for the people listening to understand the kind of work you do and the impact you've had through digital surgeons?
Yeah, certainly. So I think, there's a million clients that come to mind right now over the years. We've had the pleasure of working with, celebrity clients like Lady Gaga to, large established brands like the footwear brand Sperry, which, was started in New Haven, Connecticut originally. Lots and lots of amazing brands. I think the benefit we've had is that we've been able to plug into some of those folks' internal visions and then really finding a way to manifest those visions. So I'm really excited about a lot of the work we're doing right now. We just recently launched a really disruptive business in the cannabis space that already we've been able to get a national partner with. So the business is less than 1 month old. The name of the business is Hue. They're doing some really disruptive things in the cannabis space here in the States. Obviously, regulations and legislative is changing a lot. And for some people, cannabis is medicine. And it's helping them a lot. And I've personally witnessed this with friends and family who have been able to benefit from pain relief or anxiety relief or being able to sleep better as a result of it. I personally do not smoke cannabis, but one of the things I love about the work we do is we get to work with clients of all different industries. So right now we're working with a really breakthrough client in the crypto blockchain space, specifically in the security space around crypto. I can't say too much more than that at the moment, but we can definitely maybe have a follow-up on that when I can post a link. But I think what all of our clients have in common right now is we're helping them design demand. And I think the reason we're helping them design demand and the reason that we're being successful is we're doing a lot more listening than talking. We're asking a lot of questions. We're really caring greatly about their business, about their customers. We're helping to surface what we call progress and possibilities in a different way. And, I think a little bit about like Hue, the cannabis company that we just recently brought to market, that we are really, really bullish on right now. And we listened. We did tons of customer qualitative research. We listened to the market. We understood what people were consuming, weren't consuming, what were the stigmas associated with cannabis, all the things around it. And then from there, we had an informed stance and an informed point of view that we were aligned with on their CEO and founder. And then we were able to craft a unique brand experience and bring that to market in a way that's now been quickly picked up in dispensaries, which is a core place that they'll be distributed, and a number of things. And I think that process is always the same true. We call it the brand DNA process. So what we do is we go in, we do this thing called a horizon scan where we look at that gradation of change. We start with where are we today? Where are we going in the near future or the long-term future? And we go as far out as we possibly can with the client. We get them to step out of that day-to-day and to really step into that space of possibility, that space of where they can go. And then we work it back. So then we basically help them design the sort of chutes and ladders roadmap that gets them that blueprint for success. So, ultimately, I think when we do our best work as brand experience consultants, we're essentially architects of change and architects of progress. When we've done our worst work over the years, I think it's when we become yes women or yes men, just sort of answering, oh, yes, client, whatever you want, client. I think what clients want is growth. What clients want is to be pushed up against. I think that there's a lot of people who just will do whatever the client says. And I think what I've learned is that clients are not looking for order takers. They're looking for change makers. They're looking for play makers. They're looking for sort of progress creators. And that's what we lean into. So yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that. We've been blessed over the years. We worked with some amazing clients. I love some of the clients we're working with right now. We're doing some great work with some brands in the CPG space. We're doing some great work right now for a brand called Fresh Pet. So, if you have a dog and you're not feeding it Fresh Pet, you should be. And I'm not saying that to shill Fresh Pet. I'm saying that because genuinely, I've watched how many of my team who are pet parents, I've watched just how much regular dog food to Fresh Pet's dog food has made a difference. And that's a big thing for us too, is like part of the 4 green lights is ultimately is this client that we're going to work with, do we believe in what they're doing? There's certain clients that we have a visceral adverse reaction to, and we won't work with those clients. We turn down work all the time. We turned down work this week for a really interesting company because, quite frankly, one of the leaders in the company was really rude to one of our junior staffers. The junior staffer was trying to set up a meeting and go back and forth, and the person was super rude to that person. And then we followed up and we were like, hey, just want to check this thing. And the person was rude again. And we said, after further consideration, we've decided to remove ourselves from this RFP process, and we're not going to bid. And, you might hear that, your audience might hear that and be like, Pete, you're freaking crazy. Why would you just walk away from a potential $1 million deal? And the answer is simple. The signal that we sent and that my co-founder sent by making that decision said to that staffer and everybody else on my team and my future team, we value you first. And when you value your team first, they're going to go above and beyond the call of duty to make sure that the company is being cared for and that your clients are being cared for. So for me, that decision will have a ripple impact that is far greater than the $1 million in potential revenue that we'd have. Because at the end of the day, we have a no assholes rule. We don't want to work with assholes. So that's something that has come with time and learning. Because I'll be really clear, we didn't always have those rules. We didn't always have those frameworks. And that's probably where all this excess gray hair came from.
Yeah, I really like that. I think I'm in somewhat of a similar position in a smaller scale where lots of brands will reach out to me. Lots of people reach out to me to come onto this podcast. And I've got to look at them and I do a bit of digging first because I want to make sure that their values are aligned with what we're trying to do here. We're trying to help people, we're trying to help the listeners. And sometimes it becomes quite obvious that's not what the guest wants to come on for.
Yeah, they want to shill, sell.
Yeah, and we don't want to put our readers through that. And like you said, you've given really good advice about how to create a brand experience and to take it from listening to your potential customers and working out what they need and then creating the path for that. If somebody wants to create a brand experience for their business now, or they're at a really early stage, maybe somebody sitting at home right now has got an idea in their head, but they're not quite sure about how to make that brand experience. What advice would you give somebody right at that very early stage?
Well, one, if you're listening to this now or in the future and you're thinking about starting a business, literally send me a note on Twitter. I will, for free, no obligation, I will send you a packet that you can download and that you can go through a set of questions that you can fill out yourself. I think, again, back to self-awareness, helping to understand 5 whys. Why do you want to do this? What is the world today? What is the world in the future when you do this? What is the true motivations, getting to that root cause of why this thing needs to exist in the world, whether it's a product, whether it's a service, whether it's a different way of doing something, and going through and doing those reps. Because some businesses, you can start a business today doing online instruction, and it could be a moonlight thing that you do on top of your additional full-time job, just making YouTube or Skillshare classes. I mean, I'm seeing people making thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, with this new creator economy, right? So there's lots of ways to make money today. It's absolutely a seller's market, not a buyer's market in the current world we live in with the Great Resignation and all things that we're seeing because of the pandemic. So to the advice I'd give to someone starting a business in the future, know what you stand for, know what you're trying to do, understand, do you have product market fit? Are you trying to launch something that real people want to subscribe to or pay for or engage with? Again, not every business has to be for profit, right? It could potentially be a nonprofit. There's a number of ways to do that. So what I always like to do is once you define that vision and go through, we have a process we call the brand DNA, which is what is the essence of the business and the brand, and then what is the expression of the business and the brand. I think if nothing else, no matter what your background is, you have to know the essence, because you can bring other folks in, you can kind of beg, borrow, and steal and freelance your way to get the expression done. But that essence, that sort of kernel, that DNA, that's going to come from you, the founder, or the person with the idea. So before you think about raising money, before you think about hiring staff or leaping off the cliff without a parachute, I would sort of just really do some initial soul searching to figure out what that thing is. Again, we have a framework that we can, you can grab for free, no obligation, and just go through it. That's the first thing that I would say people should do. And then in some cases, if you go through it, you might change your thoughts. You might be like, you know what? I'm going to wait on launching this thing. I'm going to get another year or two of experience. I was advising someone that I've been mentoring, and she's leaving her job. She's got a very kind of high-end job, senior role, on track to be a leader there in the company, and young woman. And she said, I'm just not connected to the mission. I'm not connected to what we're doing. The company just sold for a lot of money, and the new acquirer is really focused on, I don't want to give too much away, but ultimately what it came down to is she wants to battle climate change. she wants to change the world, and she feels like her current employer is actually contributing to the problems around climate change. So my advice to her is, okay, hold on, let's figure out what you want to do next. Before you leap out and burn through all your savings, let's plot out what those next steps are. Maybe it's her going into entrepreneurship and starting something. Maybe it's going to work for just a different industry. I think that what I would challenge anyone to do now is just ask more questions before they just jump. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's impulse thinking leads to impulsive decisions. And impulsive decisions, some of the most bad decisions I've made in my life and career have been met on an impulse. Now, I want to be candid. I've also made some impulse decisions that have been worked really well. But anything you can do to reduce that lack, I don't want to say failure, but let's say lack of success rate, I would say I'd go with that. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, it's really helpful. And going back to you talking about, you mentored a bunch of different people in the tech industry before. Is there anybody who you helped and you think that the advice you gave them would be really useful for a wider audience? So there could be many people listening who are in a similar position and they could potentially use that advice in their own lives too.
Well, I would like to think the answer to that is yes, just for job security purposes. But the piece of advice that I often prescribe is when you can strike a balance of happiness and success, when you've defined what happy is for you, when you've defined what success is for you, and when you've been able to find that intersection, that's where sort of the real purpose gets unlocked. I always prescribe this Mark Twain quote, which is like, there's the two most important days in your life: the day you're born and the day you realize why. And I think that I have been blessed in that I've always had a passion for business, specifically design and tech and marketing. Not everyone has that passion. So if you tell someone to just chase what you're passionate about, that's frustrating advice. Because so what I tend to do now is I take a lot of my clients through exercises where I'll ask them a bunch of questions. So we have finding what you're really good at, what the world needs, what you love to do, what I like to call finding your intersect, right? When you find that intersect of where all those things come together, that's where things get lit up. So for me, that's the advice that I find that I try to do with all my clients that I coach, or in my advisory clients, is really finding out what they're here to do and why, their deeper why, and then connecting those dots to sort of send it forward. So that's what I would say shows up for me. That advice is universal. I apply that to every person I work with. More specifically, the advice that I've been going for a lot of my startup founders, that I do a lot of work in the direct-to-consumer space. So folks that are like launching businesses online, Instagram, TikTok, Shopify, et cetera. I recently worked with a client called Naboso. They're in the wellness space. They have an incredible proprioceptive technology that stimulates the brain through the feet and also now with the hands, because they have these sensory sticks. And it's just naboso.com. When we started working with the brand, the business, they were very, very small, still in the six figures a year in annual revenue. And now we've sort of like hockey sticked them to launching new products and launching new services. And I think ultimately the role that we played in that was helping to truly understand the picture and the vision in the head of the founder, and taking that picture and those raw ideas, getting them out of her head. She's a brilliant, amazing founder and CEO. Taking those ideas, packaging them, and then bringing them to the market in a way that mirrors her vision with what the customer's needs and wants are. And by needs and wants, I don't mean just articulated, but unarticulated as well. So a lot of times when you put something in the market, you're not putting something out that customers say they need, but your research and your intuition tells you the customers do need it. So I call that the unarticulated needs and wants. And in doing that, we saw hockey stick growth. So I think that really, said simply, it was about crafting a brand experience that connects the founder's vision to what the customers actually need. And then being the referee or the matchmaker in between those two things, it's a chaotic place, right? Being between a founder and a customer, because the customers can be voiceless or faceless if you don't know who you're going for. And the founder can have very strong opinions. But I'd say when you navigate those two things, that's a recent example I would give. You can check out their work online. We just launched a new amazing recovery sock product for them, where when you wear these socks, it helps you recover faster from any type of physical activity, whether you're on your feet or working out. I've personally benefited from the product, as has my family. So yeah, so that's an example of just like cutting through the fat and the noise and really getting to that essence and getting to that core DNA. And it's a lot of work. It's a lot of questions. It's a lot of hard conversations. But like anything, like the question you asked about leadership, it all starts from trust. It's approachability and trust. And from there, it goes from there. So I hope that answers the question. I was loving that one.
Yeah, definitely does. And definitely check out that company as well. Sounds very interesting. Now, you mentioned as well that you've got a bookcase full of books on leadership. What's the one you'd recommend if you could only recommend one?
So the book that punched me in the chest, in the heart, sorry, not in the heart the most, was a book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. You know that book?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great book.
That book got to me because there was one concept that really, really lit me up, which was this concept of, are you a wartime or a peacetime CEO? And it was reading that book that made me realize that I am a forever founder, but what it takes to lead a company past the pioneer phase into the scale phase, that's not who I am. So that self-awareness for me helped me realize that I want to work with entrepreneurs because I am an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur and I know what it's like to be one. And helping lead founders to get to that place where they can have that inflection point where they decide, all right, is it time for me now to take this thing to IPO or bring in a CEO or do whatever? So I think that self-awareness for me is that book really changed my world. But I have a whole Goodreads list of things that I've read. I'm an avid reader. I read everything I can. So if the audience is watching this and is looking for book recos, hit me up on Twitter at Pete Sena. I'm pretty social. I love Twitter. It's one of my favorite things to do when I'm not working. Yeah, I'm happy to share all my other book recos. Another great book that I've been putting all my new managers through is a book called Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. And I would say one of the people in leadership that I discovered far too late was Brene Brown, specifically with her work around vulnerability and trust and just the way that she likes to lead. I think had I discovered the Dare to Lead book in my first 5 years of being an entrepreneur, I think it would drastically have improved my empathy, my self-awareness, and my ability to lead with courage and confidence. And that wasn't something that I learned too late. But unfortunately, like most great pieces of advice, the best way that you learn great advice is by experiencing it. So again, no regrets, but at the end of the day, those are two books that if you're a founder of a startup, definitely read those two books because I think that those will really resonate with you on a deeper level and make you feel like you're not alone in the thoughts and feelings and emotions that you're going through, the seesaw of entrepreneurship, as I like to say.
Yeah, it's definitely a seesaw where the volatility, isn't it? Where 1 month is good, next month, not sure, but it's part of the fun in a way, isn't it?
It's part of the fun. I couldn't agree more. Respect the journey because the journey is the destination. If you can kind of, not to get all meta on you, but but it really is in a lot of ways.
So it's been a pleasure to talk to you, Pete. You mentioned your Twitter. Is there anywhere else that people can reach you?
So I recently put up some updates to my own website. It's just petesena.com. There's a contact form on there if you want to get in touch. I'd say I'm probably the most responsive on petesena.com or Twitter, but I'm on every social platform you could think of. Medium, I've been publishing a lot on as well recently, and we'll continue to do so next year. So I look forward to hearing from you. I hope this was helpful. If it was, just please, or maybe it wasn't helpful, just share that feedback with me. I'd love to hear it. It's always interesting to sort of be shouting and seeing who's listening.
Thank you so much, Pete.
Cheers.